Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome. I have lots of things to share with you. So, last week I was at a real estate conference in Austin, Texas, to catch up with other agents that I know around the country to get an update and idea on how the real estate market is doing, how the housing is doing. So, I have some things to share with you about that. And so that's why we took a break from having a live but I have some things to share with you today. So here's the first article that I'm going to share with you. And this is where we're talking about kind of like according to some of the news outlets, is a potential battle that is happening between baby boomers and millennials, so millennial generation. So just to give you an update, when we're talking about millennials, these are young adults between the ages of 29 and 47. And when I was doing a little bit more digging about the differences, and really is fascinating to see the differences between different generations, here's what we know today about the millennials. Millennials have a new life stage, which is called delayed adulthood. If you notice, everything in many ways is delayed for them. Career, marriage, kids. Some of them are maybe still finding themselves, and some of them already maybe are on, they're on unsecure footing. The fastest growing parents are between the ages of 30 and 42. And some of the millennials are split into two groups. Some of the ones that are actually following the rules and doing the things, meaning I finished schooling, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have kids, I'm going to buy a house. And there's another group of millennials that are kind of struggling to figure things out. And this is where some of the delayed things that are happening, where they are getting jobs and getting situated, and then potentially then they're saying, okay, now I can maybe get married, or maybe I don't get married, have kids, and then talking about buying houses, which is what we're talking about today. And a lot of the millennials are not actually tech savvy, no matter how much they think they are. They're actually called tech dependent. So I learned some interesting stats during the conference where we're talking about different generations and how different generations do everything. So, of course, in my real estate practice, who we focus on primarily is baby boomers and their families. And it's a very different generation. Is when we work with you guys, it's very different, and we truly understand what's important to you. So let me share about this article, because what millennials are saying right now is that baby boomers are preventing millennials. You guys are preventing millennials from being able to buy a house based on the current market. So let me share this article with you, and we can take a look at it. I thought that was very much interesting. So let me see. Share screen. Okay. So this is an article from realtor.com. And here's what they're saying. I thought that was interesting. Millennials may be called an unlucky generation. Just as they entered the market hoping to buy their first homes, typical mortgage payments soared. Amid rampant inflation, home prices had shot up more than 60% in 4 years, and mortgage rates surged to their highest in recent memory. Now, these young prospective home buyers weren't millennials, they were actually baby boomers. And the year was 1980, when mortgage rates topped 16%, and the average monthly home loan payment jumped 34% from a year earlier. And here, this is the conversation that I have on a regular basis, where I'm talking to my senior clients and they look at the housing market, and yes, they see the increased interest rates that are now between 6 and 7%. And even though they say, yeah, it's a little bit uncomfortable, they're higher, but then they kind of wave their arms, right? You guys are waving your arms and say, oh, well, these guys haven't seen anything yet. When we, back in 1980s, when we had to go and buy a house and we needed a roof over our head, and these are the rates that we had, and they were double digits. And guess what? We went and got it done, and it was hard work, right? So where the younger generations nowadays, some of them, when they got into their 20s, all they saw and all they knew was 2.5, 3, and 4%. And to them, that was the norm, right? That was the norm for them, which is what was the norm for you guys in the 80s, is 12 to 16%. So to them, the new norm now that they're looking at and they're completely freaking out is the 6 to 7%. And this is the reality in the situation that we're dealing with. So to continue, these figures come from a NewRealtor.com analysis of historical home prices, incomes, and mortgage rate data. They closely correspond with contemporary estimates reported back in 1981, which called the record surge in mortgage payments astounding. And we can definitely believe that. Millennials perhaps are bitter over the economic havoc wreaked by 2007 global financial crisis, just as they entered the workforce, having long complained that the boomers had it easy. And that was the normal for the millennials at that time, because they literally entered the workforce when the collapse happened, when the housing market tanked. You're talking about 2008, 2009, 2010. Houses were cheaper, jobs were plentiful, and college tuition could be paid off with a summer job, according to the common wisdom of Reddit. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Reddit, especially my older generation. Reddit is a platform where there's lots of conversations that are happening with folks like you and I. And you can go and find something that is of interest to you. And there's lots of discussions that are happening. So if you're not sure what Reddit is, I encourage you to check it out. I find some of the conversations and some of the topics are very interesting. A lot of them are actually very entertaining as well. According to our historical analysis, boomers arguably faced the toughest housing market ever for first-time buyers. So here we are talking about the fact that actually it's boomers who had the hardest time and not the millennials. Why? Because imagine having a mortgage with a 16% rate. So during the years when boomers turned 30, the share of median household income needed to make the typical mortgage payment averaged 33.2%, which is the highest of any living generation. So really, perhaps, is the boomers that should be complaining and saying, you know what, you guys, millennials, and maybe Gen Zs, because they're going to be coming up, maybe these are the guys that have it the easiest. So I think, in my opinion, it's all about the perspective. So going on, the article says, in contrast, millennials on average face the lowest mortgage burdens thanks to a decade of ultra-low interest rates following the Great Recession. For millennials turning 30, the typical mortgage burden averaged just 22.5% of median income, which is, according to the article, is 10% less than what the boomers were facing. So that's lower than 25.8 average mortgage burden that was faced by Gen X. And just a reminder, Gen Xers are ages of 48 to 59, and even edges out 22.6% share paid by the silent generation, which is the generation before you guys, before the boomers, based on the available data. The young millennials won't turn 30 until 2026, and the reliable mortgage rate data goes back to the early 70s, covering just the tail end of the silent generation's first home buying experience. You know what I can tell you is, from the research that I do for the regular videos that I publish, the mortgage industry was very much different before World War II. It was very much different in terms of how you were borrowing the money, for how long you were holding the mortgage. And it was a very interesting read. So the way we do this now and how the mortgage industry works and how mortgages are done now is just completely different, very much kind of like a 180 degrees based on, what was happening and how the home buying was done before World War II. The mortgage industry really have evolved to help everyone in the United States to become homeowners, which really is the American dream. So it's a very kind of I know I'm going on the tangent, but it's a very interesting read in history to kind of dive into that. I might, you know what? I might just actually bring that up on another live to share this with you guys because it's very interesting overall. So who had it worse? Mortgage payment as a share of income for each generation of first-time homebuyers. Here's an interesting graph here that you can take a look at as well with me, where these are the baby boomers purchasing between 1976 up to 1995. And then, so the blue was the silent. Yeah, so the green is baby boomers, right? So look at this rate right here. Check this out. Yeah, so the silent, okay, so baby boomers are green. So the typical share of income needed to make payments on the new mortgage, 53%. And then yellow, of course, is, okay, so Gen X is orange and millennials are in red, and they turn 30 during the period marked with the corresponding color. So as you can see here, it's not that bad. Look at these numbers right here. So yeah, so baby boomers, I think, had it worse. Still within each generation, there have been periods when typical mortgage burdens shot above 30%, as they have done for the past years. Today's millennials are entering the house market as first-time home buyers, have a legitimate right to gripe. Although today's housing market is not the least affordable in history, it is the least affordable in the 40 years and suffers from low inventory levels. Buyers in today's market face high prices, high mortgage rates, and low levels of affordable inventory, making it exceptionally challenging to purchase a home as a first-time buyer. So if millennials had it easy, why didn't more of them buy homes? It is true that U.S. home prices have consistently outpaced inflation for as far back as reliable data exists. In 2024, dollars adjusted for inflation using the Consumer Price Index, median home prices averaged $193,000 over the years the silent generation turned 30, compared to $227,000 for boomers, to almost $280 for Gen Xers, and $320 for the millennials. So inflation adjusted home prices grew 18% for boomers from the prior generation, 23% for Gen Xers, and 14% for millennials. But mortgage rate affect monthly payments to such an extent that for much of the decade leading up to 2022, millennial homebuyers faced lower mortgage burdens than even the silent generation homebuyers at some point during the late 1970s, when the rates were, above 7% was standard, right? So this is what we're talking about. So according to another statistics, 45% of baby boomers were able to buy their first home between the ages of 25 and 34. And as of 2019, only 37% of millennials in the same age owned a home. And this kind of goes back to what I was telling you about, that millennials are thinking about home ownership, and some of those adulting responsibilities, as my daughter calls it, are a little bit differently. They're actually delaying some of those responsibilities for quite a few of them. So what else is in there? What else is in there that I wanted to share with you? So although boomers didn't have the same student loan burdens as millennials, many of them also entered the housing market during a period of high unemployment. The unemployment rate peaked at all-time high of 10.8% in December of 1982. And then unemployment rates averaged 7% over the 1976 to 94 period, when boomers were turning 30, which is where the millennials are right now. And you know what, too? For millennials, the unemployment rate averaged just about 5.6% over the same period. So actually, for millennials, it's less. And as you know, unemployment rates is one of the markers that is closely watched, just to figure out how the U.S. economy is doing, in addition to the Consumer Price Index, which is the pricing of everything that we have, the food, and also the housing market. So here's what I can tell you. Yeah, this is pretty much it in terms of the article. Millennials can be griping, and I think the issue is not just necessarily with the interest rates, but there's quite a lot other things that are also coming into play. Not just interest rates, but also, yes, that's what we're talking about, and we have been talking about it for a while, is the situation in the housing market where there's low inventory, because those of us, including baby boomers that refinanced between 21 and 24, and they are very comfortable with having 2.5, 3 to 4% mortgage rates, they don't want to give them up, and we totally understand that. So some people are thinking that if the rates come down, then boomers, which is the biggest generation that is really holding on to these homes, then they're going to be more open to potentially letting go of those rates and going ahead and selling homes. So we'll see. Time will tell. The Fed is projected to potentially do a rate cut in September. So we're going to wait and see closely on kind of what is happening. So that's the first article. The second one that I want to share with you has to do with what's going to happen once mortgage rates drop. So I want to share this one also with you and see what you think about that. Okay. Okay, so this one is from Realtor.com. Experts predict what the real estate market is going to look like once the mortgage rates drop. And that is the biggest question that we are all trying to figure out. And all we can do is provide our opinion. And here's what I can tell you that I have been talking to a lot of boomers and their families in our consultations, in our practice, is this. Experts can predict all they want on what they think is going to happen, but the number one rule in the housing and the real estate market is location. Where you are located matters. It varies from state to state. If you really want to take a bird's eye view, I mean, if you think about it, you have to get on the plane and fly for 6 hours just to cross from East Coast to West Coast. So when I was in Texas last week, I felt like I was actually in a different country. It really felt that different. It's the climate and the trees and the styles of the homes, everything very much different. So when you're talking about market, I guarantee you that the market in Texas is very much different than the market in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. And even if you do take Texas, the market is going to vary differently how things are going in Dallas and Fort Worth up north versus how things are happening and what's happening in San Antonio, because it's going to take quite a bit of time, quite a few hours just to cross the state. So this is where I want you to, and I invite you to, when you are listening to the experts and what the news are saying, I want you to think about this and take it with a lot of grain of salt and to ask yourself, great, well, this is what the experts are saying on TV, and this is what they believe is going to happen. Let me find out what is actually happening in my marketplace. Let me talk to the professional that works in my marketplace and ask their opinion, because they know exactly what is selling, what is not selling, because they are professionals in your local market. So here's what the experts are predicting is going to happen, what the real estate market is going to look like once the mortgage rates drops. So the high mortgage rates have paralyzed America's house market, and they are falling. We've seen that, and they could nosedive further by the end of the year. And I can tell you for a fact that interest rates don't just nosedive. They are reduced at very incremental numbers, and they're never dropped, because you can't do that with the economy. So rates for 30-year fixed mortgage plunged to 6.47, the lowest in over a year for the week ending on August 8, according to Freddie Mac. And with inflation losing steam and the economy kind of cooling, expectations are high. The Federal Reserve could make not just one, but maybe 2 rate cuts by the end of the year. So we're expecting one in September. So we're going to see what happens then. And then we're going to then think about and see what's going to happen after that. Because remember, in between all of those things, what is happening at the end of the year? We have elections coming up. and a lot of people are nervous and trying to think about what is going to happen there as well. So we're just keeping an eye on things. As a result, the senior economist expects mortgage rates to drop further in September and December, which is encouraging news for potential home buyers who have been waiting to participate in the market. But this is also encouraging news for homeowners who might be thinking of selling. Is it time to finally list their property on the market? And if they do, what should they expect? So yes, when the rates drop, the home buyers that were not able to qualify because of the now higher rate are able to do so, which means there's going to be more buyers on the marketplace. And as you know, when the inventory is low, we don't need any more buyers. So we're hoping that lower interest rates are going to entice a lot of the boomers who are sitting very comfy in their homes to say, you know what, maybe it is time for me to downsize. The house is just too big and I can't do those stairs anymore, and the yard is too big. Okay. So to help shed some light on what's coming down the pike for home sellers, here's what real estate experts are predicting. The lock-in effect rate will ease and homeowners will start selling. A recent Realtor.com analysis found that 86% of homeowners have mortgage rates below 6%. That is 100% correct. Understandably, many feel locked in, unwilling to trade in their low rate for today's higher ones if they sell and buy again. So home sellers have been sitting on sidelines and they just don't want to give up their COVID era interest rates. But once the rate drops further, that could change. The faster the rates drop, the less homeowners will be held in place, and we could see both new inventory and more sales. There are a significant number of sellers that couldn't stomach right or wrong going from 4% to 7.5%, but they can stomach going from 4% to something in the 5 to 6 range. I agree. That sounds a lot of this. It sounds like a smaller rate. What's the word I'm looking for? Range, right? So between 4 and 5% sounds a lot better than 4 to 8. That's for sure. More home buyers are going to enter the market. Absolutely. In the same vein, the sellers have frozen in place. Buyers also felt a bit icy and out of the market. But if the mortgage rates are going to continue to decline, then experts predict more buyers who have been on the sidelines finally jump into the market. So when rates drop, I think you'll see pent-up demand hit the market again. Some buyers, like sellers, shelved their house hunt because they felt the payment was too high, but a lower rate makes shopping a bit more affordable. So for people, that's exactly what I already said. For some people that didn't qualify at 7.5, they are able to qualify at 6. So you have more people again to able to buy as well. So in other words, once rates fall, the market will see both more sellers and buyers, and more sellers willing to sell and buyers willing and able to buy. So any seller thinking of listing would be wise to start prepping right now. 100% absolutely. We're going to actually talk a little bit more about that. Mortgage rates have been improving and they are bringing potential buyers out early, many of whom gave up on the buying because of the low inventory or the higher rate. For sellers, listing their house early may give them the opportunity to sell before their competition hits the market. That is also true. This is the conversations I've been having with my senior clients. And there are definitely signs that home buying activity is beginning to bounce off of the mat. Mortgage applications have perked up. So this is kind of what the experts are saying. Now, home prices will likely to remain high. That's the other problem. These are the conversation that I've had and the comments that I got on some of my videos. It's not just about just interest rate, but it's the record high prices mostly due to multiple offer situation where the buyers were upbidding the prices just to win the home. So the good news for sellers, absolutely, that even as the market gets moving, home prices are expected to remain high or dip only slightly. If sellers will continue to be in a historically strong position as the U.S. housing market is still short millions of homes, assuming that there isn't a severe recession, we will likely only see modest price increases in most markets in 2024. However, the expert says that formerly hot markets like Denver, Austin, and Phoenix may see more significant drop in housing prices as smaller investor money sits on sidelines. Here's what I can tell you. My conference was in Austin, Texas. I have one of my best friends lives there, and we spent some time and we were talking about how the market has drastically changed in Austin year over year. So as an example, and I don't have the exact numbers, but last year they had something like 5,000 homes on the market, which was a very strong seller's market. This year, I think they have over 15,000. That's huge. This is a difference over 12 months as a result of higher interest rates. And Austin is a very tech center. There's lots of big companies that are headquartered there. Indeed, I think Google has a big building. There's a huge Tesla factory that we actually drove by. I think it's like a mile long. That's where a lot of the Teslas are being put together. So the employment is there. And these are high paying tech and factory jobs. Yet look at how the market is. So I don't know the details because that is not my expertise of market, because I don't live and work in Austin, but it was very interesting to hear how much of a difference it is. And this is why I always say it is so important for you to take the information that you hear on internet and on social media, what the experts are saying nationwide, and then take that information and say, okay, how does that apply to me where I am in my local market? So with that being said, it will be smart for sellers not to get too confident with their home pricing. So sellers may still benefit from realistic pricing and encouraging buyer competition. In other words, sellers shouldn't set their hopes price too high. Otherwise, they're going to price themselves out of the market 100%. Now, multiple offers may make a comeback. The increase in the competition among buyers may also mean that the sellers once again find themselves in the inevitable position of being able to choose from several offers on their homes. And I can tell you that, again, multiple offers haven't left some of the markets. They're still prevalent in mine. And so it depends. Some markets have seen a big cool off, like Austin, and some markets where I'm at are still hot, and we're running around. That's for sure. So that was, and you know what too, what is also important to understand, kind of like to go back to what the article was saying about having the sellers get ready sooner than later. This is the conversation that I have with a lot of my sellers, that they're saying, well, Olga, you know what, I'm thinking about, I'm just going to wait until, I'm not going to be ready to sell until January. So let's talk in December. And I'm telling them that talking in December is way too late, because I guarantee you 100% of you do not realize just how much stuff you have accumulated of being in your home for 30, 40, or maybe even more years. You don't realize, because you just get used to seeing what is around you. And what I recommend to you is, even if you're not thinking about moving, my recommendation to you, there is stuff that you no longer use or need, or maybe you have that little thought in your mind, you know what, I really should get rid of it. Maybe I should look at some of the stuff that I have in my home. My recommendation to you, start tomorrow. Because when the time comes, and for some boomers, that time comes sooner than you think, because you never know, with your health or maybe some other concerns, things can change overnight, and you have to do it when you have a tight deadline. It is extremely stressful. It is not the position that you want to be in. So if you are thinking about making a move, or maybe getting your home ready because you want to stay in your home, you still need and want to declutter. You still want to right size to make sure that your home is safe for you. You don't have a lot of clutter, so that way you can freely move around and you're not going to trip over things. So another question that actually came up today with a client when we were in the middle of inspection was, she asked me if the experts are saying that it could be a market collapse. It could be something that we're going to be seeing like what we saw in 2008. And I can tell you that is not true. We have the mortgage industry and the housing industry has learned a lot of lessons based on 2008 crash. That was a crash. And there's an awesome movie that is, what is it called? With Christian, let me find it. I think it's called The Big Short. Big Short movie. Yes, exactly. So the movie is called The Big Short, and the main character in there is Steve Carell is there, and also Christian Bale and some other guys. And it actually talks about what happened in the housing crisis in the mortgage industry back in 2008, 9, and 10. If you want to take a look at it, it is unbelievably accurate. And I actually very much enjoy watching it, and I'll periodically rewatch it. So, what happened back then is not going to happen again because the government and the mortgage industry and the real estate industry took very hard lessons, and they have implemented safeguards to make sure that it doesn't happen. At the same time, if you want to look at it now, quite a bit of percentage of homeowners have great equity in their homes because of the increased pricing, because of the what's been going on in the housing market starting with basically 2020. So just to give you a perspective, Boise, Idaho, I think has the highest increase in home prices around the country, and that's over 50%, which means that those homeowners in many cases have equity that is now greater 50% than what they had maybe 2 to 3 years ago. So are we still going to see the same millions of homes in foreclosure? It's very unlikely because it's a very different circumstances. So are we seeing housing collapse right now? No, we're not. What we may have coming up is maybe some kind of adjustments, because I am honestly wondering is how long these prices are going to keep going up and keep increasing, because it's the challenge of the increased rates and high prices is where I think is the challenge is for a lot of folks. And also depending where you are in the country, property taxes do play a big role on that monthly payment. If you are in some of the markets with, the top 5 markets that have the highest property taxes, which is Texas and New Hampshire, California, New Jersey, this is where we suggest to clients to actually keep more attention to property taxes, depending on where they want to be, maybe the neighborhood, the school district, or the town that are going to actually affect your monthly payment. So here's some interesting comments that we have coming up. So Karen says, we live in a 55 plus community in Central Florida and moved from Minnesota 6 years ago. Our cost of living is way lower in Central Florida than Minnesota, and I still work and got a huge raise working from home. And you know what, too, where you live, this is kind of goes to in the point of what your location is matters. Depending on where you are, some of these are going to hit you harder, some of these factors versus others. So I agree with you, Karen. And also, you know what? The other thing that I've been thinking about is in terms of baby boomers, especially those that are living in the 55 plus communities, my concern also is how are those communities are going to be affected in another 5, 7 to 10 years, where most of the baby boomers are going to be 65 and older, and they're not going to be able to stay in their homes. Maybe they're 2 stories, maybe they're just too much to handle. And quite a few of them are going to be putting them on the market. And guess what? 55 plus communities deed restriction, meaning that only someone who's 55 and older is going to be able to buy them. There's going to be a multitude of homes that are going to be coming on the market. And we're going to have to wait and see how that's going to affect the overall real estate market. So it'll be interesting. I had a conversation actually with a lender a couple of days ago. We were talking about that could there be a potential where the builders or even the townships are going to remove these deed restrictions from some of these communities because of the overabundance of houses that are going to be for sale there. So we're just going to have to wait and see. So someone else said, or the same company, let me just see. Same company I worked for in Minnesota, no state income tax is huge. Our brand new home was only 186,000 in 2018. Easily paid cash. Everything is walkable. Got rid of one car, have a golf cart and two bikes. So yes, we talk about the fact that if you are thinking about retiring and downsizing, if you want to move, is potentially going to a state that has no state income tax is an option. And of course, a lot of people are thinking about that when they're saying, oh, well, I'm going to retire, I'm going to go to Florida because it has no income tax. However, keep in mind, guys, that just because there is no income tax, the government still has to collect money to survive one way or the other. So if it's not income tax, then they're going to collect it somewhere else. So and that's another thing that I'll be talking about in some other upcoming lives, is the cost of living in Florida has really skyrocketed in terms of other things that you may not even be thinking about it, especially if you are on a fixed income, such as the cost of your, water and sewer. The water is very expensive in Florida. The cost of your homeowner's insurance is very expensive because in lots of areas you're also required to carry flood insurance. You're required to carry hurricane insurance. And I have a few clients who have retired happy to Florida, and now they're not very happy, and they're thinking about moving out of state. So we're looking at some options and working with them to see how we can come up with some good plans. Jen says, my current mortgage is at 2.25%. If I would sell, but I cannot fathom going to the current interest rates and prices. I would be insane to do it because my mortgage would increase substantially. Jen, you are amazingly fortunate to have 2.25% because I can tell everybody that it's never going to happen again. Anything under 3.5%, 4% is very low. So those rates that some of you guys have, it's basically free money. If you think about it, the cost of living adjustment for inflation was 3.2%, and your mortgage is 2.25. My suggestion to you is just, if you can, hold on to it. And if you have some extra money, instead of putting it towards the mortgage, unless you just want to pay it off, my suggestion to you is take that money and put it in a high yield savings account where you can earn between 4.5% and 5%. So, however, if you have to sell when that need becomes more important to you than your mortgage rate, then it's a good time to sit down and have a conversation on what is important and how do we make it right? What do we do to make sense? EOS says, when people say, when the rates go down, people will start buying again. The reality is the home prices themselves are way too high, and it should be more realistic, like when the economy gets better. I agree with you. The reality is it's not just the interest rates, but it's also the home prices. And you know what? I'm reading some other reports where they're saying that the median home prices are starting to come down. And again, it's so hard when you lump the whole state, the whole country all together, all the states, and you're saying, oh, well, some of the prices are going down. It may not be the case. It may not be the case in your specific location. So it may not be the fact. So let's see. People don't have to spend half of their paycheck buying food and gas, and then maybe they will be able to put away enough money to buy a house at those prices. So lowering interest rate isn't going to solve the problem. Home prices need to crash alongside the prices of everything else. In order to do that, we need to make the dollar strong again. And you know what this gentleman is talking about here is the consumer price index. So that is something that is tracked every month. And this is where they're talking about how inflation is affecting our economy, the cost of goods that we have to buy. And what I consider the most important ones are the things that we absolutely need to survive. So those are the things that are housing, of course, because we need to have a roof over our head. And then it's food, and utilities. Those are the necessities that we have to have in order to survive. And all the other things, additional things, it could be fun, or it could be additional things that we would want, but those are not necessities, right? Those are not the things that we need. So when you're looking at the price of some of the individual food items, they have increased dramatically. I also saw that one of the biggest things that have increased in their steady, just keep going month after month, is the cost of car insurance. It has increased some really crazy numbers, and I think all of us are feeling it, right? So this is where we're talking about how do we buckle down and maybe reduce some of our expenses that I do talk about in some of my videos. You family says homes are just too expensive and rates don't matter. I think that both things are important. The prices and the rates, they do matter, because when the rates go up, less buyers are able to buy, because there's only so much they can do. And you know what, that's the other thing too. When you are looking at these figures and the way the home prices have been jumping, depending where you are located, our salaries don't jump with the same rate. It's not like someone's salary in Boise, Idaho has increased 50% over the last couple of years. Where have you seen an employer increasing your salary by that much? Right? They do small increases because it's a cost of living adjustment and they want to keep their employees happy, I hope, and they do this, but not at the rate of 50%, I don't think. So I'll actually be curious to know, if you guys are still working, what is the percentage of your salary increases that you have seen in the last few years, just so we can compare. So if you want to think about and go back to like 21, 22, 23, if you can just put something in the comments to let me know. I'm curious to know, what is that percentage that you received of your pay increase year over year, depending where you're located. That will be something interesting to track and see how that compares. James said, would resist buying anything right now. The stability of the economy is much in question. It's obvious that sooner or later property taxes will have to be raised. That is, if we are even allowed to own our own homes in the future. The "you will own nothing and be happy" approach by the WEF has much money behind them, and it has been my observation the wealth usually gets to make the call, the norm. So why would I spend my money if the house may get taken away from me in the near future? So I'm not sure what WEF stands for, but the stability of the economy is much in question. I'm not sure if it's necessarily actually the stability, or more or less of some of the factors that are making the economy uncomfortable, right? So we're looking at, there's lots of different factors that are going into keeping an eye on the economy, and what are some of the biggest ones that are key indicators that the economists are watching. Every month they're going to be publishing those reports. You know what, too? Typically, things get a bit hectic, especially during the year when the election happens. So, and we have election coming up in just a few months, and some people are nervous because they're not sure what is going to happen and when that's going to happen. SS says, where are the more buyers are coming from? People are losing their jobs, and remember that everything has gone up: food, gas, cars, etc., and people are broke. I hear you. This is exactly what we were just talking about. The consumer price index is tracking this every month, and if you guys haven't looked at it, look at it. It's actually very interesting to see. And a lot of these prices are increasing at a much hectic and higher rate than your Social Security. If you are working maybe full-time or your part-time job, for sure, the costs and the expenses are increasing. And for some of you, it is getting out of control. And you know what? This is what I talk about in a lot of my videos, is it's important to have a pulse on what is happening in the economy, what is happening in the real estate market, how are things going, what you can expect, let's say between now and the end of the year, right? Because we're now in the second part of the year. But what I encourage you to do is to realize and just be mindful of the fact that what is happening in the economy, what the government is doing, is not something that you can control. Those are the things, all of those things are out of your control. What you can control is the vote at the election for the candidate that you believe is right for you based on your beliefs. What you can control is take a look at your expenses that you have on a regular basis every month and see how can you maybe make some adjustments. If your homeowner's insurance is getting out of control, nobody says that you have to stick with it until the end of the year. You can shop around at any time. You can change insurance carriers at any time. You're just going to get the prorated amount refunded to you. So there's a lot of things that you have in your control that you can change to help you and reduce your expenses, or to maybe even increase your income that you have coming in by maybe getting a part-time job or changing the job that you have now, or maybe doing a side gig or doing something else. So just some food for thought. John B.O. says, thank you, like-minded, valuable information. Most aren't paying attention, nor do they care to comprehend. I hear you. And you know what? This is where I think it's important that once you take this information, don't take it for what it is. Do some research and make sure that it actually is reliable, not just reliable information, it's reliable source, and it actually applies to you where you are located. And take the time to really process this and see what you think and what your opinion is. HDPT says, who wants to buy an overpriced home and high HOA fees, especially in Florida? Well, yes, a majority of the home, I want to say it's more than like 70% of the homes in Florida, I believe, have HOAs. I have mixed feelings about HOAs. I am for HOA if what they're doing is truly for the benefit of the community and the residents that live there, to make sure that the community is maintained and the rules are followed. What I don't appreciate is when HOAs start to nickel and dime you and they have opinions on things that they shouldn't really have opinions on, because it's not what the HOA doesn't cover. So, and I believe there was a new rule that was recently passed in Florida that was giving kind of like, I want to say, slapping HOA's wrists a bit and reining them in, maybe pouring on a bucket of cold water on them and saying, listen, guys, here's what you can control and help the residents with. And some of these things that you have been doing for years are just, they're not what you should be doing. So if you are in Florida, or maybe if you are thinking about relocating to Florida, you may want to look into it. And especially when you're doing your due diligence and you are making a move to Florida and you want to buy a home that it has an HOA, you have to make sure that you review all of the bylaws and the documentation that is provided to you as part of the resale package to see if that HOA is actually solid. What do they cover? How much money do they have in their reserves? Are there any lawsuits that are happening against that HOA? There's a lot of reading material that I encourage you to do to make sure that you are actually buying into a community that is thriving and not on the brink of potential issue. I had a conversation with someone who lives in Florida, and he recently sold a property. When he told me that he only owned it for a few years, I asked him, I was like, well, why did you sell it? And he said that he attended a couple of HOA meetings and he realized that the president of HOA was very controlling. He's been on the board for like 20 years, and that they had money in reserves, but they had some capital expenditures that were coming up to take care of certain things, and they wouldn't have enough money. I think they had like $2 million in reserves, and they would need $5 million to do those projects. And nobody was thinking ahead and trying to plan on how they were going to do that. Or their liability insurance for common grounds were not in place. So he said to me, he's like, Olga, when I thought about it and I realized how the HOA was run and by who, I did not feel comfortable owning a home in that community, and that is why I sold. And I said, you know what? I said, what you say makes a lot of sense. So that is why I caution a lot of my clients, when you're dealing with HOA, if you want, get involved, because your voice does matter and you can make a difference. Or if you don't want to get involved, at least understand what your HOA covers, or if you're going to be buying a home with HOA, what are the rules and regulations, and if there's any assessments that may be coming up because, let's say, they need to put in new roofs or they have to resurface the pool, whatever that may be. If HOA is actually solvent and it's thriving versus not, because that means then your HOA dues per month or per quarter are going to go up significantly, and you may not have planned for that, right? Randall says, what effect do you think rates will have on rent prices? That's actually an excellent question, Randall. And what I can tell you is what I have seen in our market is the rates on rentals have also increased quite significantly, and they're almost like kind of following the path of home sales. And the reason being is that for those homeowners that we talked about earlier who are not able to now buy a home because of the higher interest rates, what do they have to do now? If they can't buy, they're going to continue renting. And that means that there was a higher demand, and there is a higher demand for rentals in the area. And that means that the landlords and the apartment complexes are saying, well, I'm going to capitalize on that. See, there's a higher demand. People can't buy. They're going to come and rent to me. That means I can increase my rents. And that's exactly what's happening. So the rent prices have gone up. And I talked to a couple of clients who are now not able to get a home as first-time home buyers because of the increased rate, but they're also very upset because the price on their apartment has gone up significantly as well. And unfortunately, there's really nothing that they can do about that except for maybe move into an apartment that is cost less per month, right? That's how you can control your cost in terms of that. AJN says, after 4 years of searching for a house in southwestern PA, inventory is non-existent and considering just giving up and staying where we are at. When we started looking in November of 2020, we were looking at 4 houses every weekend. After January 2021, it was like a light switch turned off, and it was 8 months before a house came on the market. We were able to look at it and we were outbid. We have not looked at a house since October 2022. So I'm not sure if there will be any inventory anytime soon. We are basically priced out at the present. Dear AJN, I am sorry about your frustration, and I can totally, completely understand that. I had quite a few buyers last year and this year feel deflated and hopeless for the same reason. And some buyers may not have the extra funds to be able to compete in multiple offer situation. Some buyers may not be able to buy now, even though they were able to buy a couple of years ago, because of the fact that of the higher interest rates. Now the new mortgage amount they qualified for a couple of years ago is now unattainable. So my suggestion to you is don't give up hope. That is what I tell everybody. Don't give up hope, because I guarantee you the rates are now, 6.5% or 7%. They will go down. The time will come. So if you were able to find something now and just buckle down and make sure that you are able to manage, that's the biggest piece, is to make sure that you are able to afford to have that mortgage payment and still have an opportunity to live, right? Because we don't want you to be house rich and everything else poor. But then down the road, you're not locked into this rate. You can refinance down the road. So if you were able to wait maybe a year or two until the rates come down, then that is what I would recommend to you. TP says the average family doesn't have $10,000 for emergency. Homeowners are now paying part of their monthly budget on credit cards. Ugh. Car repossessions are up 40%. The average car loan in the United States is between $700 and $1,000. Wow. Well, I don't have a number to suggest to you in terms of the emergency fund, but you guys, a lot of you guys know from the videos that I have already shared with you, is that I'm a big proponent of making sure that you have an emergency fund. And the emergency fund typically is at least 6 months of your monthly expenses, whatever that may be. So if you are not sure what that means, then it's time to sit down and then grab a notebook and your favorite pen, right? And sit down and write down your expenses that you have every month on a regular basis. And then ask yourself, if you were to lose your job all of a sudden, which can happen, it can happen tomorrow. If you had that, if that had to happen, would you be able to survive while you're looking for a new job for at least 6 months? Will 6 months of your required necessary expenses be covered? And those things are what? Your housing, right? Whether it's rent or mortgage, your food, your necessities like utilities, your cell phone bill. If you have, maybe if you're making payments on your student loans, things like that. Those are the most important ones. It should be covered on just your fingers on one hand. Everything else has to go away. Everything else has to be put on hold. Whether it's coffee, whether it's subscriptions, whether it's other things that you like to do, they have to be put on hold if you don't have those savings. And a few of my favorite ways of coming up with that emergency fund is, number one, especially it matters, especially at the end of the year. If you're getting a bonus and you do not have an emergency fund, that bonus has to go into your emergency fund right away. You put that money away. If you get a nice pay increase, until your emergency fund is built up, all of that pay increase every month, every paycheck needs to go towards that emergency fund. And then also in April, when you're doing your taxes and you're getting tax refund, guess what? You're going to put that money in your emergency fund until you have built it up and you have 6 months worth of expenses in there. That is one of the easiest ways for you to do that. And once you're done, then you're done. You don't have to worry about it. And I guarantee you're going to sleep better knowing that you have that money put aside. And also, the other point that TP is making has to do with the average car loan in US is between $700 and $1,000. I'm curious to see what you guys are, what is your, if you have a car loan, what is your monthly payment? Because to me, between $700 and $1,000 is absolute insanity. It really is. And a lot of you know I am actually proponent for not buying a brand new car. I'm a proponent of buying a car that comes off of lease that is 2 years old. Because if you know the stats, the car loses the value as soon as it rolls off the car lot. Right away, it's still brand new. It has 1 mile on it, maybe not even that. It's going to lose value. So you're losing money when you get in that car and you haven't even driven it off the lot yet. So this is why I'm not a proponent of buying new cars. I'm a proponent of buying a dependable and reliable car when it's maybe 2 or 3 years old. And this is when you're not going to have a $700 or $1,000 payment, because you're going to be able to have that money saved up, potentially maybe dip into your emergency savings, because the car is a necessity to have, especially if you're not in the city where you can do the public transport. This is where you can dip into that money and be able to purchase something. So, and of course, yes, this is where you have some choices, where we're talking about above the necessity on what kind of car you get. If you're getting something inexpensive and dependable, because guess what? Toyota is going to get you places just as well as a BMW or an Audi, but your monthly payment, I guarantee, is going to differ, right? And this is the conversation that we have with some of the family members of my boomers, where we're talking about some planning. We're talking about how are we controlling our expenses. This is where it's an opportunity for you to make smarter choices, where you can actually cut down and reduce your expenses. Summer says, there are many businesses and enterprises that are buying the properties and rent them out. No wonder the prices have not come down yet. Ha! I am glad that you brought that up. And this is more prevalent in the Sun Belt area of the United States. So think about like the bottom portion of the states. So South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, parts of Texas, I believe, is where a lot of the venture capital firms are getting into real estate business. And you know what happens is that what they're doing is they're buying properties for cash. They're outbidding our regular human beings like you and I because they don't care and they have deep pockets. And then they rent this house out to a family and they increase quite a bit the rent amount because they know that there's demand for it. I actually have a partner in the he's in, I think, in the Jacksonville area, and one of the houses he sold was to a big corporation like that, and they outbid every other offer that was there because it was if I felt like it was like a man in the castle just putting in a bid somewhere. They waived all the inspections, they didn't do anything, they just wanted the house. And they, when they were going to buy it, they were going to rent it out for probably an absurd amount of money and put a family in there. And, that's kind of like what we're seeing there. So Kevin said 465. I'm not quite sure what that means. So maybe you can dig a little bit deeper there. So yeah, so there's some interesting conversations that are happening in the housing market. We're wrapping up August, right? So we're going into almost the end of the third quarter. So we'll see how the market is being affected as we get closer to the elections. And that will be another interesting conversation that we will have. So, so that's that. Those are the couple articles that I wanted to share with you. It's interesting to see how and who is reacting or being proactive in the marketplace, especially when it has to do with the housing market, and how different generations interact and react to news and to the current situation, whether it's economic or political, how different generations react differently. So I thought that was very interesting. So let's see what else we have. Lots of other interesting comments too. All right, guys. Well, I had so much fun talking to you for about an hour. So thank you so much for joining me. Next week, we're going to have another heated discussion about what else is happening in the housing market and how boomers are controlling it or doing something or reacting to something. And in the meantime, if you have some interesting articles or interesting news that you want to share with me that you want to talk about in the next live, please share with me in the comments. And you can always also email me. I'm happy to dig a little bit deeper and then have a nice conversation. So we will see you guys next Wednesday again at 7 o'clock. Bye-bye, everybody.